Hi, my name is Amanda Lamond. I am the director of the Center for Integrative Law. Integrative law is a global movement of lawyers and legal professors and students and people from any part of the legal profession or associated with it, who are working to heal the legal profession and give birth to a much needed new system, which actually meets the needs of society as it is now. Because as you probably know, so much of the way we practice law is very outdated. My particular interest is helping lawyers to see their role in a new light and also to focus on integrative wellness, because I believe that if lawyers aren't healthy themselves, if they're not psychologically in a great space, if they don't have great conflict resolution skills, how are they going to be able to help their clients? So I used to use the tagline, healing the legal profession one lawyer at a time. And I hope that you will find some healing in the presentation that I'm going to do today. I've always been interested in this idea of energy. I think in every, testimonial comment that I've had about myself in all the jobs that I've done, the one word that seems common to nearly all of them is Amanda is an energetic, individual. Energetic kind of comes into all of them. And it intrigues me because quite often I feel exhausted and close to burnout. And yet I'm realizing that I am perceived as a very energetic person. So over many, many years, and I'll dip into some of my stories, I have become fascinated with my own energy levels, what dictates them, where do we get our energy from, what could I do that would, serve me better, apart from drinking more coffee, which doesn't, of course, serve me, and why somebody is drawn to coffee, for example, why other people aren't. And I know that there will be parts of this talk that resonate and maybe parts that are quite out there. One of the facets of the integrative law movement is bringing in all different disciplines. So, for example, today I'm going to be talking about such a wide range of things, and you won't find that many talks by lawyers do this, where they cross-reference, Ayurvedic health and, spiritual healing and God and the divine and our purpose on earth and organizational development. And a million other things besides. So bear with me, it's going to be a journey. Now, let me find my slides and share the screen with you. There they are. And share. And then I need to just put this onto from current slide. Right, here we go. And maybe I should move myself down so that it's not in the way of the writing. So you will see me in the corner of the screen, but you can look at the slides so long. So today the talk is entitled Manage Your Energy and Not Your Time. It's a journey of exploration into managing our energy. Oh, and it doesn't want to change slides. So hold on one second while I see why that is. It's not letting me, okay. We need to click, it won't let me use the arrows. So I started an organization called Walela, which unfortunately I've had to close, but I am rebirthing it in a new way as we speak. Walela stands for Women Leading Law. And the reason I started it is to deepen the conversation around what constitutes authentic female leadership in law. I believe that we need to connect, nourish, and illuminate women lawyers. And I believe it's women who will facilitate the emergence of a healthier legal system. You probably are well aware already that it is women who are fighting for, not working 16, 20-hour days. And largely that's because women still, in most countries, bear the biggest burden in terms of household maintenance and child rearing. But even in those who don't have children, in terms of domestic chores, women still seem to bear the brunt of that, although things are changing. And so women have been fighting to change the system for a long time. I've often said that the legal profession is a profession that's built by men for men. And I don't say that, as a criticism or a judgment necessarily. It's simply a fact that the systems were designed by men for men, and very often they don't meet women's needs. So women are fighting to change things. And also there's the sense of wanting to bring more of who they are and an enormous ability, more of an emotional ability and intuitive skills into, for example, conflict resolution. So we're seeing a lot of change by women. I want you to just take a moment to close your eyes if you can, because the picture you've seen now, just close your eyes for a second. And I want you to I want you to feel into your body. So not think, but feel in your body right now. What do your energy levels feel like? If you had to give yourself a rating out of 10 right now, what would you give yourself? In terms of 10 being super energetic and 1 being, exhausted, so tired, can barely move. Okay, and now I want you to feel where in your body is the energy. Is it in your head? Can you feel it more in your chest and heart area? Can you feel it in your stomach? Are you perhaps holding your stomach muscles? If you turn your attention to your shoulders and neck area, can you let them go a little? Can you feel that you maybe are holding your shoulders a little bit up towards your ears without even knowing? Can you relax your butt muscles for a moment? Can you relax your toes? Can you start to deepen your breathing and slow it down? And I want you to just ask your body how it's doing. Check in with it. Finders that lawyers don't spend any time connecting to their bodies because they're so busy in their minds. So I've often said this, that we tend to see our body just as a life support system for our head. So just take a moment and ask your body how it is doing. And just take this moment to feel present in your body. Physically present. Imagine, see your feet on the floor. Here you are, resting on the earth. You've relaxed your muscles a little bit. Stretch around if you need to. Connect with your body. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes and we'll move on. I wanted to share a little bit about my own energy journey. It'll be woven through the various bits of the talk. But this picture I took when my kid was, let me see, I think that he's about 18 months in this picture. I knew when everybody said that you don't get to sleep when you have a kid that it was probably going to be my biggest challenge, but I didn't know it was going to be quite that hard. So what happened is he didn't really sleep much. He was awake probably, waking 6-8 times a night for a while. There were obviously I was breastfeeding, there were the regular feeds. And I thought that I was doing okay until about the 4-month mark when I actually felt like I was losing my mind entirely. And I went to go and see a therapist and I just said, my God, like I actually feel like completely fragmented in the head. I just couldn't stop crying. Like I couldn't even see straight or think straight. I was super anxious and I started imagining I was hearing him crying every time I did try and go to sleep in the small little breaks that I got. And what we managed to look at was all the things that I do to keep myself sane. So doing yoga, doing running, meditating. I like to spend quite a lot of time reading, like calming activities. I get quite a lot of sleep. I've realized that that's very vital for my own constitution because of expending a lot of energy. And basically, when I had a kid, I gave up everything. So all of my coping mechanisms, and including some medication that I've been on from time to time. So I gave up everything and then wondered why I lost my mind. So a lot of us are not even aware of the things that we do to manage our own energy until those things are removed for some reason. We're no longer able to do them. So for example, some people stay sane through running, and then they, twist an ankle or something and can't, and suddenly after 6 weeks find that they're losing their mind, and only then become aware of what a role the running was playing. So I came to realize, it was another deepening, maybe it wasn't the first time that I saw it, that our energy levels are not purely physical. So we aren't just machines where, we can just plug in and then sleep for X number of hours, and then you get Y number hours of usage. So we're not like a cell phone battery. That isn't how our bodies work. We're not like that. It depends on what's going on in our lives. And sometimes there are a lot of applications running, just like on your phone, and therefore you run out of battery far earlier than usual. So even when we are exhausted, we may find that some activities actually give us energy. So I want you to think about, when you're doing a job you hate, what happens to your energy levels? And how, for example, doing a boring thing, studying for an exam that you really don't enjoy, or some chore that you detest, you'll find that you really start feeling exhausted. Whereas even if you are very tired and you do something that you enjoy, you can find you get energy. I had an experience of that quite a while ago now, because we're in lockdown and we don't go out. But I remember one night I was so tired, I nearly canceled the dinner with friends. I couldn't face it. And then at about 11 p.m., I suddenly caught myself. I was in the car park with the friends, still chatting as we were trying to say goodbye. And I thought, wow, I can't believe I made it to 11 p.m. And, I'm engaged and chatting and laughing. But being with them had given me so much energy. So we need to know that energy is not just a physical thing. There's an emotional component as well. So I have learned along the years, and I want you to reflect on your own learnings. How many hours of sleep do you find you need? Because each person is different. What is your consumption of caffeine like? So I am a recovering addict. I share that with a lot of people. So I don't have any shame about that now. It's been part of my journey. And I used to be addicted to stimulants. So although I gave the drugs up and alcohol a very long time ago, 17 years or so now, I definitely still have a propensity towards wanting to be wired, and I choose, and therefore my drug of choice is caffeine. So at the moment I have 2 cups a day, but I am aware there are times when it tips me over the edge, when my anxiety levels are already quite high. I'm learning to work with that. There have been times I've briefly given it up, but I have to admit I found it quite hard. And I find that I tend to have 2 modes. So I'm either like on and going for it, or I'm, finished and down and don't really want to retreat and be quiet and not do anything at all. And for me, my journey is about how to find that middle ground. And I'm curious about what that's like for you. Do you find that you have an on mode and an off mode, or are you better able to regulate somewhere in the middle? Where does our energy come from? So we look here at the different dimensions of energy. We know that there's a physical one. Let me move my face out the way so that you can see that. There's an energy. So when we talk about our physical energy, that's often where we're talking about the quantity of energy that we have. And we know it's important to listen to and care for the body. So for example, it's about what we eat and how much water we're drinking. Did we sleep? All of that stuff, which we know that stuff's quite obvious, but we still don't do it, do we? The next component is the emotional dimension of energy, and that determines often the quality of our energy. So not the quantity, the quality. And there it's necessary to embrace all emotions. I'm reading an extraordinary book called Letting Go by David Hawkins. I highly recommend it. And really, it's about how everything in our life, this underlying drive, is trying to escape our negative feelings. And so everything we accumulate, and all the wealth that we want and the things we want and the people and the clothes and the makeup and the hair and all the stuff that we spend so much energy worrying about, is trying to run away from the negative feelings that we have about ourselves and our lives, the fear, the anger, everything. And to sum it all up, we need to learn how to feel those feelings so that we're not living our life in reaction to them and giving all our energy to them. And yet, especially for lawyers, because we live in our heads, we tend to think about our feelings, not feel them. So if someone says, how are you feeling? We can tell them a whole lot of thoughts, but they're not actually the feelings. So one of the exercises you can do is to sit quietly when this talk is over and actually feel in your body where the feelings are. So when you're angry, where do you feel the anger? When you feel fearful, where do you feel the anger? So not your thoughts, your feelings. So back to the diagram. The next level is the mental dimension of energy, and that determines where you focus your energy. So, are you scattered? Is your mind buzzy? Are you able to focus? And those of you studying right now, you will be very aware that at times you have amazing focus and at other times you're completely scattered and not able to even take in information. That's about awareness, mindfulness, building wisdom. And then the final dimension is the spiritual dimension. And we're going to talk a bit more about that. So that's your energy force. And when you feel like you're in alignment with yourself, you're doing what you came here to do, you are being authentic. In those cases, you're going to find that you have a lot of energy. Whereas when you are being inauthentic, you are expending a whole lot of energy and you're going to find you very drained. So moving on to the next slide. We have to look at energy in an integrative way. If you confuse burnout with depression and address it only with antidepressants or therapy, you'll overlook the behavioral changes you must make to restore your depleted physical and hormonal reserves. Left unchecked, burnout can be lethal. So if you're anywhere between lightly toasted and totally charred, it's time to chill. I'm a huge Martha Beck fan. I've read quite a few of her books and she really is extraordinary. So if you can get your hand on anything written by Martha Beck, do. And otherwise you can Google some of her videos. She's got lots of stuff on YouTube. She is an extraordinary life coach. She's been on Oprah a lot of times. So they call her the most famous life coach in the world. So you'll find her if you look online. So I think that what is really important to look at here is that sometimes burnout and depression can be confused. We can physically burn out because our adrenal system gets burnt. It's basically when you're running on overdrive all the time, part of our body learns to be, it's in that fight or flight mode constantly, which means it's not having any time to recover and recharge. So even though you do sleep, you're not actually restoring your energy levels. It's kind of like charging your phone for 5 minutes and then you're going again. So you never get the true relaxation and recovery loop that the body needs. And sometimes the symptoms can be very similar to depression. So therefore, what Martha Beck is saying is you have to look at the behavioral changes that we need to make to restore our bodies. And it's interesting, she mentions hormones there as well. One of the reasons why they say that so many women in professions like law struggle to fall pregnant is that this burnout and adrenal exhaustion, it really affects women's hormones in a different way to men. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of the science there, but basically, stress releases cortisol in the system, and men have a lot more testosterone in their bodies, and that works with cortisol. It kind of works with it in a different way and absorbs more of it. So I don't have the technical understanding, but because they have testosterone, it kind of counteracts to some extent the cortisol, so their bodies don't have this complete burnout and exhaustion as a result of too much cortisol. It takes much longer for men, whereas women burn out much faster because we don't have anything counteracting the cortisol. So behavioral changes, and we have to look at why those are so hard for us to make. And it's always our feelings, because the fear is driving that behavior. The energy zone map. This is by Dr. Ela Manga. She's a South African doctor and a wonderful woman. And she wrote a book. In fact, I've got it right here on my shelf. It's been renamed because the title she used, somebody claimed was already the title of their book. So here, The Energy Code. And I think the new title, it's been renamed, is Breathe, is her new book. And she's very into using energetic breath work. It's an amazing book. It really, really is. And it talks a lot about different people's, approaches and their energy. And she was a GP who started seeing that it wasn't so much, illness and diseases that people were coming with. the majority of her practice was people who were exhausted, and everything and all the health symptoms that they were suffering from were because they were essentially burnt out. So she's now focused her entire practice on helping people manage their energy. Just to touch on this very briefly, because I don't want to go through the whole slide, ad nauseum, but we have here the optimum zone, the green zone. So you're sleeping well, you have healthy bowel habits, strong immune system, you are able to relax when necessary, you are self-aware, mindful, you've got boundaries, your EQ is good, you're focused, motivated. Then we go into the danger zone where you start to feel a little bit more wired, so like a bit more on edge, and you feel more wired than you do tired. And in this zone, we've got rising cortisol levels. You start having sleeping issues, struggling to fall asleep, or else you fall asleep because you're exhausted, but you wake up and can't go back to sleep. Blood pressure goes up, shallow breathing. You start, because you're tired, to use stimulants, so the coffee thing that I was talking about. Weight gain or weight loss, difficulty switching off, your mind kind of ruminates. That's why a lot of people use TV, because they're just trying to numb, like find something that turns the brain off. Starting to get irritability and anxiety. And then you cross this tipping point over there between the orange and red and move into the burnt out zone. So your cortisol levels now drop. You feel exhausted most of the time. You sleep, but it's not restorative. Hormonal imbalances, more of a brain fog. Depression, loss of meaning, loss of direction. You can't motivate yourself. You actually don't feel like hanging out with people socially anymore. And that's when your adrenal system starts becoming so fatigued that it takes a long time to recover. There are ways that you can restore the adrenal system, but it takes time. And if you allow yourself to go too far and spend too long in this burnout zone, it can take, I was speaking to a friend, colleague about a week ago, and she had to take 18 months off. That's 18 months where she could barely earn anything because she could barely get out of bed. And yet so many of us push ourselves to that point that it has to get so bad before we're willing to make changes. My hope is that by listening to this today, you might take it seriously enough that you make some of these changes that are needed now, instead of waiting until you've reached the point of burnout and hung out there too long. So one of the other things that affects lawyers is this left brain versus right brain dilemma. So we know that lawyers, because we're trained law, it's a left brain discipline. So we like to be logical and rational, and things must make sense. We want them to. We want to use our intellects to understand everything, because that's how we are trained as lawyers. But actually, stepping into your power means stepping outside of logic and rationality and reason. And where my own path has taken me is moving far into a spiritual path, a journey, and into a space where we follow intuition and you are guided and magic occurs in your life. And to do this, I've realized you have to let go of that like left brain. I've got to understand this. It's got to be logical. It's got to be rational, because so often life just isn't. One tiny example, I was sitting at my desk years ago and I was trying to work out how to find, advocates' names to invite to this conference. And I was in a state and I was like mailing people and just, I've got to figure this out, because I was so stressed about the income for the conference. And then finally a voice in my head said, just walk away, just go down. I live near the sea and Sea Point. Just go for a walk, like walk away from the computer, close it down. So I did. And there on the promenade, crossed in front of me an advocate I used to know, and within a couple of minutes we were chatting, and he said, oh sure, I'll just get my secretary to send you the list of all the advocates, details that you're looking for, and I'll help you and get people to the conference. No issue. And I walked back to my house after my walk thinking, how did that happen? I was trying so hard, and actually all I needed to do was step back. The universe provided the answer for me, but I had to stop trying so hard. Okay, so we need to learn how to move out of this place there that everything has to make sense, and just allow something quite magical to guide us. You will not truly grasp the concept of increasing your energy until you're ready to move out of the left brain and allow yourself to experience. So it's not about something you can understand, you actually need to experience it. So where does energy come from? What is the source of energy? Where does our life force come from? We know it's not just a physical thing, because you can sleep 8 hours a night and you can drink green smoothies and you can still be exhausted. So I believe that it comes from somewhere else entirely. Energy, they say, cannot be created or destroyed. You've heard that. People attribute it to Einstein, but apparently it was someone else who said that. I believe that our energy comes from a divine source. So something that is greater than ourselves. Dr. Ela Manger, who's a doctor, in her book, she talks about IPOL, IPOL, the intelligent pulse of life. We don't know what makes people's hearts start to beat. It's an electrical impulse, and why, when we're done at the end of the day, the heart stops beating. We don't know, even doctors, the exact nature of breath and how that works, but we do know that the minute that the body is deprived of oxygen for too long, the heart then ceases. There is so much that doctors think they know, but when you start reading medical journals, for example, they actually just can't explain a whole lot of things. So where do you draw strength from? And do you believe that there is something much greater than us that is often feeding us? So now I'm going to talk about the cross you're carrying. And this is not a religious talk, and I'm not talking about that cross. What I am talking about is that there is a vertical dimension and a horizontal dimension to our energy. So the horizontal dimension, and just excuse this poorly drawn graphic, it was the best I could do to try and just show you what it was that I was thinking. On the horizontal dimension, we have our life, earthly activities. So that's what your days and weeks and months are spent on. What? How many things are you involved in? Are there a huge number of things? Are you part of every society and you're taking extra credits and you helping your granny on weekends and your cousin, and you do this and you do that, and you have smaller siblings, and you take part in sports? Are you one of those people who is spread quite thin on the horizontal plane? And then if you look at the vertical axis, we're talking there about at the top, your connection to source energy, whatever you call that. So, the word God may not resonate for you. Maybe it's Allah, maybe it's Buddha, maybe it's whatever other term you use. The connection to source energy, something greater than us. And at the other end of the vertical axis is being grounded or earthed. So the question there we ask is, how grounded or rooted are you? Do you have a sense of belonging to your community? Or do you have a strong sense of self? Do you feel present here, or do you kind of feel that the winds of change can blow you left and right? So this is the cross that you're carrying. Now, if you look at the next image, what sort of cross do you have? So the very bottom there, you'll see we have a very huge horizontal axis and a very small vertical axis with very little grounding there and centering, a little bit of a connection above. So someone whose cross looks like that, they have a bit of a starvation of the soul life. So in other words, you might feel famished for a life that actually has meaning. And you groomed on the outside, but actually you feel a bit empty on the inside. And someone whose cross looks like this might be driven to numbing their feelings or excessive behaviors, because you can see that they're doing so much that their energy is spread very wide. But in terms of what grounds the energy and what brings it in, very little. If we turn to the cross directly above that, you'll see there's equal attention to the spiritual and psychological part of the journey and the earthly journey. So that's a more balanced cross. And then if we look at the final one, we have a person who they have a deep grounding, very deep and conscious spiritual connection, and not such a huge horizontal line. So this person isn't spreading themselves, into all sorts of activities. This type of person might feel more grounded and secure in themselves, maybe have a strong sense of their place in the world, in existence, and they don't feel overstretched. So that's just something for you to think about. What does your earthly journey and your horizontal axis look like? How many activities you're involved in? And then what does your vertical axis look like? How grounded and centered are you? And how connected to something greater than yourself? So what is this thing about grounding ourselves that I talk about? Well, you know, the term actually comes from electrical terms. And we know that things need to be earthed. If you've ever had the joy of wiring a plug, you will know that there's one that's called the earth. And we need that so that, for example, you don't get an electric shock. So it's all about energy moving through something. And in order for energy to move through and not destroy something, it needs to be grounded or earthed. So I want you to think about your own energy as I read this. It's a definition of grounding in electrical terms. A device can be damaged without warning at any time from static electricity that has no way of being discharged, as well as another source of voltage coming in contact, for example, lightning. This can originate from various sources, internal as well as external. The idea of the ground is to trip the breaker, preventing damage to the device or electrical shock to the user. If the device is not properly grounded and any number of events occurs, the device may be damaged beyond economical repair. So, if you think about that analogy, our human systems are very similar. There may be unforeseen energetic events coming from the outside. So there, for example, the picture that I've used, you know, a client screaming at you on the phone, something that you don't really have control over just happening at you. And there may also be internal events where you feel, you know, a bit like you're going to explode. And in all these cases, you need to be grounded and centered to cope with that energetic discharge, because otherwise what happens? You lose it. You're either going to cry or freak out or scream or start swearing at someone or unleash your, you know, rage upon someone who's close to you, instead of being able to hold that enormous discharge of energy that's come, literally kind of like lightning, without frazzling yourself. So we all need to be grounded. And I have a document, which I can locate somewhere in my computer, about methods of grounding yourself, but it's also something that you can Google. So walking outside is really good, and we need to walk barefoot. Okay, it's a little cold right now, pretty much freezing today, but walking on the ground, even if it's for a few minutes when the sun is out during the day, it's very important. And actually sitting on the ground from time to time, and then doing like meditations where you bring your energy down into your body, so that you're not just in your thought system the whole time. Checking in with your body, as we did at the beginning of this talk. So there are lots of methods of grounding yourself. Walking in the forest is a wonderful thing. You can do that in winter. You don't have to go barefoot. Definitely try and spend time outdoors, away from computers and screens that tend to just bring our energy up here. So moving on from the necessity of being grounded is this question of, where are your energy circuits running? So I'm going to tell you something which blew my mind, and it may do yours. I found out that in ancient China, when there were only a few people trained in medicine, and often people lived in rural areas far from the medical person, when a person was ill and couldn't travel to see, let's just call them a doctor, they weren't, you know, they were Chinese medicine doctors, but when an ill person couldn't travel, members of their family would go and see the doctor, and the doctor, through reading their pulse and reading their bodies, would determine what was wrong with the ill person and send back the necessary instructions, remedies, and herbs for the ill person. And I heard about that and I thought, but that's, I mean, it was many years ago and I was much younger in my journey, and I thought, but that's insane. Okay, the logical, rational mind was like, you can't test someone's pulse who's a relative of the ill person and figure out what's wrong with the ill person. That's just not possible. But it is, because there are many people who can do it. Not those who are trained in modern Western medicine, because, as you know, just like our legal training, it's far too rational and logical, and they don't work with the extraordinary healing power of the body and the mind, etc. But we bear not only our own energy signature, In our own bodies, we also carry the energy signatures of those who are close to us. That to me is really fascinating. I had my own experience of this when I went to see a kinesiologist, who I later found out is also to an extent quite psychic. And it was many years ago. She put her hands on me and then she said, gosh, you have a really busy mother. Quite frantic, in fact. What is she so busy? What is she running from that she has to be so very busy? And I looked at her in amazement. I thought, okay, she just put her hand on my back and she's telling me I have a really busy mother. And in fact, my sister and I that year had been giving my mother a hard time about how busy she is. And we started buzzing when she'd come near us and going like, bzzz, you have to stop being so busy. So the fact that this woman could pick it up from my own body amazed me, but I realized it is true and there are people who have this possibility. So think for a moment about the energy levels of those around you and how they manage their energy, your family members, and then how those might be playing out in your own energy system. Because believe it or not, we are affected. This is what I called the papilios energios. Okay, I made that up. It's not real Latin. I did this picture when I went away for a night when my kid was, I think, about 11 months, and I'd stopped breastfeeding and I went away for 2 nights. It was my first time away and I was just so excited to just have my own space for a moment and to sleep in my own bed and not have, you know, anyone crying or screaming. I have an amazing husband. And I did some work. I went to a little retreat center and I did some work with the amazing energy healer there. And she spoke to me about my energy circuits and asked, you know, what I'm plugged into. And she said, she also can read your energy. She explained to me that if you look at the bottom of this butterfly, we have the past and then we have the present, which is the center of the butterfly. And then on the other side, we have the future. And so often our energy circuits are plugged into the past and in the future. So most of us spend our time still concerned about tasks that we've left undone, which drain our energy. We may have unresolved relationships or incidents or traumas. And because we've never fully processed them, we're still plugged in a sense, to those things. So anything that, you know, occurs in our life now may trigger that old trauma, abuse, or loss. And also, we spend a lot of our current energy that's available to us on suppressing that painful thing. Back to that book that I mentioned, the book about letting go and surrendering, how everything is about our feelings. So if something hasn't been completely processed, then our energy circuits are still plugged into that thing in the past. And we're spending our energy from now into suppressing and repressing that thing from the past. Then the rest of us are, well, all of us really, are spending a huge amount of time worrying about the future. So right now, I know many of you are studying exams. You may only watch this when you finished exams, but you are very concerned about what's going to happen next week and next month. And, you know, will I get articles and what's my future going to look like? And, you know, will I ever get married? Will I meet this person? Like, we spend all of our time. Will I be able to pay the rent next month? We spend all of our time plugged into the future. And what that does is mean that there's very little available energy now. So if you just imagine that we get 100 circuits a day of energy. So if you are plugged into your divine source of energy, you are grounded. Imagine every day each person gets 100 circuits. And you imagine these wires. Where are yours plugged into? How many of those 100 are plugged into things in the past? How many of those wires are actually plugged into circuits in the future? And what does that leave available for today? So it may not be around, for example, how much you've slept and how well you're eating, etc. And that's what I wanted you to see with the slide. That it could be that you are so plugged into the past and the future that there's very little energy available for the present. So reflection time. I want you to just make a little note that you're going to think about the energy butterfly, where your circuits are plugged into. You're going to think about the where your energy is coming from above, and you're going to think about what your cross looks like. So on the horizontal axis, how thinly are you spreading yourself? Where is your energy from above coming, and are you grounded and centered? And then think about your family's energy systems and what you may have inherited. So when I've done this talk live, I actually act this out. There is a woman called Donna Eden, and she talks about how you can get the energy flowing in your body again. There is a video, you can just Google Donna Eden's energy routine. She's quite a wacky lady, but you will find it's like a 5-minute routine, and you do these thumps. That's going to bang on the microphone. You do these thumps on your chest, and you do various kind of tapping, and you do a pulling across your forehead like this, and it really is amazing. This one you might want to do with me. Okay, so you pull from your forehead, put your hands here, and you pull. And you literally energetically are making more space in your brain. So because you're studying, you may want to do this. And then you do it over the top of your head again. And you keep going all the way, pulling, okay? Pulling quite hard, making more space. She also talks about different points on the body that release energy into your system. So if you're studying and you start feeling you're having an energy slump, instead of reaching for a coffee or some other Red Bull, or God forbid, I hope you don't use that stuff when you study, because it just drops you again and it frazzles your mind so you don't take stuff in. But try Donna Eden's energy routine. It really is fantastic and it works. You will definitely feel energized. On to another dimension of energy. This book, Women Who Run with Wolves, is an eccentric and an enigmatic book, and it's about how current cultural conditions repress vital parts of women's wild natures. So the author is Clarissa Pinkola Estes, and she says that under the current cultural regime, something foundational to a woman's being becomes lost and needs to be recovered in order for her to feel fully alive. And missing contact with this fundamental and ancient layer of her being, which is the realm of the wild feminine, as she calls it, a woman feels spread too thin and not quite comfortable in her own skin. So her daily social performances become robotic and superficial and are ultimately unsustainable. Her existence lacks juice. Many women know that something's missing, and they sense a call toward larger, more fecund life. Fecund means is capable of reproduction, capable of creativity, but they don't know what to do. And of course they don't, because our culture really names the problem and doesn't provide guidance around how and where to get real sustenance. So in the book, she talks about how women can come home to themselves in numerous different ways. And, it can be daydreaming and sitting in the sun or listening to music. We need time out. But sometimes we have got so far from ourselves that we need to run. We just need to go from wherever we are. It is quite a difficult book to read in some ways. It uses a whole lot of fairy tales, but it's also immensely powerful. So if you are interested in exploring the deep feminine psyche and really getting terms with what it means to be a wild woman, then I recommend it. Otherwise, I would for now suggest that you just Google it and read some articles by Clarissa Pinkola Estes. So there are different things that make a woman come alive. So for some, it may be being in nature, and there's some of you for whom that's probably true. So I know my sister-in-law, she gets up really early and she wants to be on the mountain, and she does it amazingly, like sometimes nearly every day in the week. She gets up early and then she sends us all pictures of wildflowers, and that's how she recharges. For some women, it's books, and I'm one of those. So books ignite my spirit, and without them, I feel like I die. But some people hate reading, but I love it. It energizes me. And when it's a subject that I love, I can read late into the night. So books that I've been reading now include The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment, and a book called Essentialism, and a Martha Beck book called Finding Your Way in a Wild New World, and Women Who Run with Wolves, and The Book of Joy. So many things. For some people, it's working with paint or working with clay. So I want you to think about what makes you come alive, what feeds your soul. And imagine, if you close your eyes, imagine the feeling that you get inside you when you do this thing that makes you come alive. Is it dancing? Is it painting? Can you commit to bringing that thing into your life? So often we just get bogged down with all the like have to do's. You know, I have to study now, and I have to cook this meal, and I have to go for a walk because it's good for me. Have to. And especially if you're going to be entering the legal profession, which most of you are, and you're going to find that your work day takes up a huge amount of your energy and your time, you are going to have to make time to feed your spirit, because without it, you will wither and you will die. And you will feel like you have to run. And the only way to counteract that is to make sure that you don't get to that point where you simply have to run. I want to know how far you are now from your wild woman self. Are you there? Or are you there? And can you give yourself permission to just experience a little bit about what your wild woman self is wanting? It doesn't have to be days. It doesn't have to be, 2 weeks trekking in the mountains. Can you give yourself an hour to just tap into that wild woman? Now, a lot of people have asked me, do I have to leave the law if I'm going to do any of this? Because obviously a lot of my work is with lawyers who are already in the profession. No, the answer is you don't have to leave the law. So, but you are going to have to become very aware of what in the law and how you're going to practice law and how you're going to give yourself fulfillment and make sure that the wild woman has some outlet. So on the left is a picture of Kimberly Stamatelos, and she's holding a book there called The Compassionate Lawyer. So Kimberly got to a point of feeling just burnt out. She did high conflict divorce cases, and she felt burnt out and numbed. And I think early in her career, I can't remember all the details, but she realized that this was not the sort of law that her father had taught her, because he was a lawyer, and she'd been so inspired. He was this like community leader, and people in the small town would always come and seek his advice about all sorts of things. And she just felt like her path in law had taken her so far from being that sort of lawyer that she was inspired by. And so she ended up writing this book, The Compassionate Lawyer, and it took her whole practice on a new journey. And she now does, she specializes in high conflict divorce, but she brings a huge amount of like soul and emotion and spirituality into the work that she does. So it has become deeply meaningful. And then on the right, we have a wonderful woman who you need to look up. Her name is Artika Tyner, A-R-T-I-K-A, Artika, and her surname is Tyner, T-Y-N-E-R. And Artika is a legal professor in Minnesota. She's an extraordinary woman. She came and spoke at one of my conferences, and when she stood up, something happened in the room. She's an orator that just has that gift that when she starts speaking, this booming voice rang out, and everyone, you could see just like their eyes opened wider and the energy in the room shifted. She runs enormous projects, and just one of them is this thing that she speaks about, that young Black girls especially like don't have any books in which they see themselves. And so she wrote this book called Justice Makes a Difference. She's often spends time in various countries in Africa on literacy projects when she's not teaching full time. She teaches leadership to law students, about how to be an advocate and use your law degree to make a difference. And she's an extraordinary woman. So no, you don't have to leave the law, but you are going to have to put in work to figure out how you bring all of who you are to what you do as your career develops, so that you don't just feel like it's all meaningless and no point. Managing life in an organization is tough energetically. I've used this image in countless presentations. I mean, I just feel exhausted looking at this picture. And these poor candidate attorneys who are sitting on the bench there, and they've got the peep-toe shoes, and they've been told to fold their arms like this. There's really no sense that people are allowed to be who they really are in this particular organization. So you are going to have to be very mindful of being in an environment like this and making sure that you are finding ways to feed your energy. Look, it may be necessary that you do articles and that you spend time somewhere that doesn't, that is rather draining. Shall we just leave it at that? But if you are still finding ways to be true to yourself and not like you just have to wear a mask to fit in, and if you make time to feed your wild woman self, then you are going to find that your coping skills are much, much better. So there are ways, even when you're in a large organization, to manage your own energy. And just a word on collective energy fields. There is research that shows that people actually release the stress hormone cortisol, and that it's catchy. So I'm not going to mention all the scientific studies, but there have been studies that show. So we are not separate. We tend to think, here's my body over here and you're over there. But you will know, if you've ever walked into a room and people have just had an argument, that you can sense it. You can sense it even if they are not saying anything. Even if the one has walked out of the room, you can walk in and feel like something's happened in there. So we have collective energy fields. And when you are working in an organization where people are largely unhappy, you will feel it in the air. And people who are more tuned into energy can walk into a place and immediately, pick up whether people there are happy or not. So I have told many students that before an exam is starting, be careful of who you hang around with, literally in the corridors, because when people have a whole lot of nervous energy, it is catchy. You can pick it up. So rather, if you are feeling anxious, stay away, put some your earplugs in, your earphones, and listen to some calming music. Maybe you've got a piece that, really sort of boosts you or helps calm you, and you listen to that before every exam. So something that familiar, it starts and you immediately feel like, okay, I can do this. Or a theme song. You may want to try that and physically distance yourself from the other people who are kind of spiraling, who are standing outside the exam venue going like, oh my God, oh my God. So there is such a thing as a collective energy field, and we are susceptible to it. So moving on to the finishing line problem in law. So just briefly, what happens in some law firms when you are, the star litigator or the star candidate attorney, people often, reward you by giving you more work. And so what you find is that you go from like project to project and you never have time to actually recover. Law students do this as well, where you have, assignment and you put in a huge boost, like you late night, whatever, big exam. But then the next day, instead of recovering, you're like, okay, that's in, submitted, or the exam's written, and now next one, and then next one, and then next one. And you are never actually giving your body or your mind any time to recover. And that can be really toxic for us, because our systems are built by needing to expend energy and then have a recovery loop, so that there's this expenditure and then rest, and then you can go and expend more. So that's what's called a loop, but you have to have the recovery part. And athletes know this. So all professional athletes know that you don't just train. You have to build in the recovery loops, because your body strengthens itself during the recovery loop and the rest time. So the rest time is as important as the training. And it seems counterintuitive to those of us who, aren't athletes and don't train like that. Like, what do you mean that the rest day is as important as the training day? So what happens with your muscles is that when you exert yourself, your muscles tear just very, very slightly. And then when you recover, what happens is that they repair themselves by building more tissue. And that's how we grow muscle. Some of you, maybe the first time you're hearing that, I found it pretty mind-blowing. So the muscles tear slightly when you're lifting a weight or you exerting. And then during the recovery time afterwards, or the day off, the muscles regrow where the slight small tears are. I'm not talking about ripping a muscle, but the small tears in exerting yourself, the muscle repairs itself by growing more. And that's how a muscle grows. So in order to grow ourselves, we have to expend the energy or push or get that paper done or do the big presentation. And then we have to have the downtime. And without it, we burn out. we're never able to harness the brilliance of that performance that we've just had when we don't ever recover. So we end up just going in a spiral and not actually moving forward. So you lose your resilience and you move into emotional chaos is what happens if you don't have any recovery loops. What else do I want to tell you about that? So we have to make sure, Ela Manga calls it always on, never done. And that's the kind of way people live now. You're always on, never done. It's like more, more, more. You need to start working out how to build in small recovery loops into your day. So activities that build a sense of calm, peace, and well-being, giving the body, mind, and soul time to recover from long periods of stress and intensity. They can range from 10 seconds to 10 weeks. So take a few breaths with me now. Look at whether you've tensed up anywhere in your body just through what I was talking about now. Drop your shoulders again. And that can just be a 10-second pause, just breathing in and out for 10 seconds. And it could be a helpful practice that between tasks, switching from one subject to another, sending an email, then moving to something else, that you give yourself this pause. And I will put my hand up and say that I'm terrible at doing this. I teach people how to do this. And I have to say, I'm in always such a flurry of like, get more done, even though I know I will actually get more done if I allow myself small breaks. It's very hard to rewire ourselves. But I'm telling you this now, that you can do it in your 20s and it will be a lot easier than if you are trying to rewire yourself in your 40s. As my other presentation on managing stress and depression in law students will tell you, the biggest issue is that people learn really unhealthy habits at law school and carry them into practice. And that is why lawyers are addicted and burnt out and suffering from depression, because they instill these really unhealthy behavior patterns at university. You have a chance to do things differently. So get up from your desk, stretch, allow yourself, don't just think, okay, more. I'm not even going to get up. People go to the bathroom and they take their phones with them. So there's no recovery time in the brain. Even lawyers do this in the office. I've seen them. I talk to them in law firms and they all take their phones with them to the bathroom. And like, why do we have to be glued every moment to something? More things coming in instead of just, allowing yourself the 3-minute walk to the bathroom, like greeting a colleague on the way, discussing the weather, just being present to where we are. Our bodies and minds crave it. And it seems such a small thing, but the effect is huge because that 3-minute break allows the brain to reset before we go back to our desks. And then, of course, we need the longer holidays. And I know for those of you who may be listening to this, because people may listen to this talk at any time, but if it is during this lockdown strange period in South Africa and the university timetable, has been kind of completely thrown out the water because of things being shut down, you may find that you get a very short holiday. It's going to be vital that you give yourself time off, that you don't just use the holiday to catch up on some next assignment, that you give yourself a period where you let the brain relax, especially because it's been such a trying year and anxiety levels are so very high for all of us, everywhere in the world. You need to make sure you give yourself some time off. I thought that moving out of the city and moving here, this is where I now live, and I'm incredibly, incredibly lucky and blessed to live here. I thought that this would change everything, that I needed to be in nature and with all these trees and whatever, I would have a completely different life. The truth is, there's a Buddhist saying, they say, wherever you go, there you are. I found I brought all of my neuroses with me, all of my tendency to burn out, to doing too much, to drinking too much coffee, to I've got to achieve more, can't take a break, can't rest. I brought all that with me. And so I very much realized that while our external surroundings can do certain things, it's what's going on inside that makes the biggest difference. And so I want to remind you that wherever you may be living, and maybe you can't get outside and you can't go spend time in a forest, it's what's going on inside that is the most important. Now I have to quickly take a break because I have a puppy at the door. Hold on 1 second. Please keep the dog for a second. So just a recap of some of these tools to shift your energy. You're going to need to build new habits around how you take care of your body. I'm going to provide this list of resources for those of you that are within the mentorship group, and for others of you, you're going to have to just go on what I'm saying here and write quickly. So habits on how you take care of your body. There is an ex-lawyer called Gretchen Rubin, who is now the author of The Happiness Project, and she's done a lot of work on habits and how you shift them. So I highly recommend that you visit her website, The Happiness Project, Gretchen Rubin, R-U-B-I-N, and look at how to build new habits depending on what works for you. She's got personality types, because not the same things don't work for everybody. So you need to look at the habits you want to shift: sleep, nutrition, exercise, and then ways that will help you shift the habit. There's a book called Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less by Greg McKeown, and that his surname is spelled M-C, capital K-E-O-W-N. Essentialism, The Disciplined Pursuit of Less. Fantastic book. You need to make time for activities that replenish and restore your energy. They're not nice to haves. This is the fire that fuels your spirit. You need to dance, you need to paint, you need to sing in the choir if that's what turns you on. You need to spend time understanding your bottom line state of well-being and what you can do to raise it. Your bottom line sense of well-being is the fact that if you imagine 10 people go into a garden and sit on a bench, and then report back after half an hour what their experience is, each person is going to have a completely different experience. And some people would have sat there and worried about like all the things that they have to, you know, still do this evening. And others would say, oh, it was so amazing, I heard the birds. So what would your experience be? What is your bottom line state of well-being? How highly wound and strung are you most of the time? So the way to raise your bottom line state of well-being is processing the pain of your past so you are not carrying it around with you and having it get triggered all the time, because that is utterly exhausting. The book I'd most recommend right now is Letting Go by David Hawkins, H-A-W-K-I-N-S. David Hawkins, Letting Go. You need to spend time figuring out your worldview and what you believe in that is bigger than yourself. So generally speaking, it's how do you regard yourself relative to other people? What do you think is the point of existence? Why are you here? It doesn't have to be religious, but it is a spiritual inquiry. And that is what is going to bring you the energy from above. You need to meditate. There are a million apps that can help you do that. There are Oprah's free meditation classes. I've had a law student who taught herself to meditate through those. You need to find ways to find your own inner stillness, because we sure as hell can't ensure there's always going to be stillness around us. It's not possible. So how are you going to find that inner sense of calm that is going to hold you when life gets hectic? And really, there's one way to do that, and that is through meditating. And it doesn't, again, for some people, there's a religious connotation. There isn't. It is just about learning to watch your thoughts and emotions playing out and not be consumed by them. And that's what meditation teaches us, that ability to step back so that we're not consumed by our emotions. You need to ground yourself every day. So kick off your heels and walk on the earth when you get home. Even 5 minutes is enough. This has reminded me that I don't drink enough green smoothies, because I used to, and I found that drinking a green smoothie every day really helped my energy. You can Google green smoothie if you want to know what to put in it. It doesn't have to be disgusting. You can add bananas and blueberries and pears and apples and a whole lot of stuff that actually makes it taste really good. So it doesn't have to be like hold your nose and drink it. Millions swear by the positive psychological effect of having plants in your system. Another thing is to put a plant on your desk and water it daily. So having live things around us. Give yourself permission to rest. So remember the recovery loops, that there are periods of action and then periods where you have to recover. And then there's about giving yourself permission to let go of things that you might be holding on to that it is time to let go of. All of these things will shift your energy. So the final thing I'm going to ask is just, what do you choose? Understand that the right to choose your own path is a sacred privilege. Use it. Dwell in possibility. There is so much that you can do that will absolutely change your life. And I've just touched on some of these tools here, but all of them, if you even just take one, it can shift your own interior experience, which will shift the experience you have out in the world, which is going to shift how other people see you. One thing can make an enormous difference. So what are you going to choose? I hope that this has been helpful to you. I hope that there's going to be something that you can shift as a result of watching this. And I hope that you're going to let me know what it is. Be well. And please reach out in the comments because it's always nice to hear from people.